Well, let's go back just a second and talk a little bit more about some of the new characters. We understand that Starbuck's daughter was going to be a major character on the show.
Yes, and actually, you know what, that was always in a state of flux, at least for me, because after conversations with Dirk, and that was one thing which, when I spoke to Richard and spoke to Herb about what they wanted to do with their characters, wasn't so sure on whether we were going to marry off in the final script Starbuck or not. Originally, there was going to be a female, but not a cigar-chomping version, more of a, I guess the best analogy would sort of be Newt from Aliens all grown up. Definitely her father's daughter. But using that template of that character, again, tapping into a lot of what Anne did in the first series with Sheba. That strong female, but still a very female character. Not a guy... you couldn't, other words, just replace her with a male actor and nobody would notice. It was still a distinctly female character. But after talking with Dirk, I actually started to move towards his thoughts on the character, which was making him Peter Pan, and making him this guy who is now, just past 50, and who maybe never got married, never settled down, never had the family, and might now be looking at those decisions of the past with a little bit of regret and a little bit of sadness. And then having Cassiopeia come back into his life and see the possibility of the what if, because she didn't wait around and she went off and had the family and had the kids and had that thing which he could have had if he had been a little less Starbuck. So that was a direction which I thought was really interesting for the character to go. But yeah, in the first draft of the script, we did have a character of Raina, which was going to be Starbuck's daughter, and then we had the two sons, who would be the grandsons of Richard, of Boxey, and we did age up Boxey a bit. We made Boxey very JFK, which was his early 40s, and this was really the first test by fire. So he had, sons which, again, were in their early 20s, and a next generation definite feel to them.
Now, I understand that using characters and actors from the original series, despite the facts that Fox knew this was to be a continuation, was a source of consternation with the network.
Yeah, it was. It was. I think they were a little taken aback by the fact that we had Starbuck in it. It was going to be Dirk, and but you know what? That's the one thing where after making now with 2 movies $1 billion for Fox, a lot of times the studios learn to trust your instincts and sort of go away with their own. So yeah, the initial impression was that I think they were thinking more of a sort of complete distancing from the original, and maybe referencing it, but not having actual characters continued on like Boomer or Starbuck or Apollo for that matter, because we did have Apollo in the pilot, and he was probably the most key character in the pilot. But he didn't have a lot of screen time. But I did let Richard know what the plans were for the character, and initially he was a little reticent because it was much more of a Darth Vader type journey. It was really about a story of him finding redemption and him coming back to the light side, which again was going to play out over the series. But yeah, it would have been a definite challenge, and I think Richard is one of those actors who would have stepped right up and really both blown away the fans and the critics with a performance that he could sink his teeth into.
Well, when we talk about that subplot that Apollo was going to be involved in, using nanotechnology to silentize human colonials, out in fandom, parallels are drawn with the Borg, and people say, "Oh, that's such a rip-off of the Borg idea." But I never felt that way. You want to defend yourself against that charge?
Sure. I mean, look. I mean, it's. I consider that a compliment because I love the Borg. But the problem I had with the Borg was there was no personality to them. You know, it was a one-note situation. I think they were a great villain, but it was sort of, you know, it was like a hive mentality, and it wasn't going to be that with the Colonials. It was going to be much more symbolic of what I think the ultimate perception of something like communism would be, and not the, you know, I mean the absolute, you know, control by the state, the absolute abdication by the individual of free will in order to get the trains to run on time. But you still have your family, you still have your job, you still have your life, but your life in a way is not your own. So it's not a hive mentality. Like the Borg were, it's much more of a, I don't know, it's like a very, very dark version of Stepford, I think would be the best way to put it. You know, it was, you know, Stepford run by Il Duce. And I think that is, you know, the complete sort of fascist state where it's all about order. And again, that was something I had given backstory to the original show, which wasn't there. Because, you know, looking back, and I'm like, okay, you have the Imperious Leader, but why is he there? Why does he look reptilian? So I had decided to do, and I know he was a Cylon, he was robotic in the original, but I was going to fudge that a bit, and say that he was the last of the reptilian Cylons, or there were very few reptilian Cylons left. So by giving the backstory of the reptilian Cylons was that they created the mechanical Cylons in order to combat the humans. This was now their weapon. This was their thing. They didn't have to risk their lives anymore. They had a completely mechanical army, and they would devastate humanity with it. But in the programming for that, there was a flaw, and there was a glitch. That it was about their need to bring order to the universe. But in the robotics, in this robotic Cylons programming, in order to bring order to the universe, they needed to destroy not only humanity, but they needed to destroy anything that had a free will. So in order to do that, they needed to turn against their masters. So that is why they turned against the reptilian Cylons. And the reptilian Cylons were devastated by this, and it actually took the robotic Cylons' focus away from the humans as they were devastating their creators, to the point where they are now, there's very few reptilian Cylons left. And the only way they can do an end around or circumvent the programming on this annihilation that will happen to them is for them to undergo a procedure through nanotechnology, which will rewrite their brain, their free will, their DNA, so that they no longer have that. So in order to survive, they give up their free will. That was how we were going to bring back or introduce human Cylons into our world. Was after this great devastation, and they find out, you know, they pull out the old maps and they say, okay, Earth, this is where we should have been going all along. But they discover that they were going in the wrong direction, and Earth is back through the heart of darkness. They actually have to go back through the colonies and back through the people they left behind. So it's that journey back into the heart of darkness.